Hello and welcome to episode number 223 of the Lines Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined by Stephen Andress. And guys, we're going to talk some NFC West. If you want some golf talk, skip all the way to the very, very end. Quick little 2 minutes on what we're looking at this week in golf, so you can go ahead and head towards the end if you want just that information. But instead, we're going to spend the majority of this podcast talking the NFC West. If you want to follow Steven on the Twitter machine, at Stephen Andress1, you want to follow me, at Matt Brown M2. And of course, as always, everything we do at the Lines is absolutely free. So go in, subscribe, rate, review, do all the different things at the various stages, audio side of things, YouTube side of things. Go over to the Discord, join there. Everything we do is free. So be a part of the community and hopefully win you some money this year in the NFL as well. So, Stephen, as we take a look here at the NFC West, we wanted to kind of start with the team where we're looking around going, we think we kind of know what this team is all about, but at the same time, it could be drastically different if the quarterback situation doesn't play out like they're leading us to believe, and that is going to be the Los Angeles Rams. And with this Los Angeles Rams squad, we're sitting here going, okay, they're just being extremely cautious with Matthew Stafford. He got an incredible amount of experience. There's no reason for them to do anything out of the ordinary with Matthew Stafford. But then you start to hear, the quote coming out that it was a, air quote, weird injury for a quarterback. And you start to go, I don't really like to hear someone say that it's a weird injury for a quarterback. And then they're being extra cautious with John Wolford as well because they don't want to get him injured in all this. And so he doesn't play in the preseason game. And then you start going, why are they protecting John Wolford so much? Like, that seems a little odd as well. So it does make me start to at least have to consider what we may or may not want to do in this division from a betting standpoint. I mean, listen, even with John Wolford, is never going to be the Seahawks. The best number you can get on them is 22-1 if you're looking to bet the Seahawks for the division. Don't do it. I don't know why you would do it, but anyway, 22-1 on the Seahawks. But the Cardinals are sitting out there. You can find a 4-1 on the Cardinals. You can find a plus 180 on the 49ers. The best number you can find on the Rams is a plus 125. I mean, I know you're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I've actually done 0 minutes of medical school, actually. So I don't know anything about any of this stuff. But what I can say is what we hear isn't at least incredibly encouraging.
For sure. But I will say, Matt, that the latest news we have, we're recording this on August the 17th, and Matthew Stafford returned to practice and was throwing the ball on August 16th. So if there was even a little bit of concern that this could be something that gets worse or cost him regular season games potentially, I don't think they're having him out there practicing on August the 16th, 3-4 weeks before the regular season starts. So I am more optimistic that Matthew Stafford is going to be okay for the season than I initially was. I was just as concerned as you were when all the news initially came out, but he practiced. He was throwing on August the 16th on Tuesday. And the quote from Sean McVay to reporters was, I thought he had great energy, great command all day. I thought he threw the ball incredibly accurately in all parts of the field, really activated all parts of our pass game. There were a couple where he's hitting the spots we want, and we just have to be able to finish some of those plays. I'm encouraged because we can coach off of those, and we're getting, so some more coach speak there. But the greater point to me is that if this was any concern whatsoever, if this was like what we saw with Dak Prescott last year, they didn't practice him at all. They didn't play him in the preseason at all with that weird shoulder thing. They were bringing in guys from the Texas Rangers to help with it. The fact that Stafford already was back practicing on August the 16th is encouraging to me.
Yeah. Liam Cohen comes over to serve as offensive coordinator this season. He is coming off being the offensive coordinator at Kentucky, but the year before that, he was the quarterback's coach with the Rams. So he is very familiar with Sean McVay, very familiar with this offense, very familiar with how McVay wants to do things from a system standpoint. So, again, he was gone last year to Kentucky as offensive coordinator, but he's back after being the Rams quarterback coach in 2020. Raheem Morris back as defensive coordinator as well. On the inside of things, not a lot. I mean, listen, the only real 3 impact players they signed, Allen Robinson, Bobby Wagner, and Troy Hill, they got via trade. So, I mean, listen, this is those are three very big impact players. Don't get me wrong. You add a Bobby Wagner on the defensive side. You add an Allen Robinson at the wide receiver position. You add Troy Hill into the secondary. Those are three big impact players. That said, you do lose some impact players along the way as well. Von Miller's gone. You lost Sebastian Joseph Day off that defensive line. You lost Austin Corbett off the offensive line. Darius Williams is playing corner elsewhere. Sony Michel, not that running backs matter all that much, but he's gone. You got Johnny Hecker, the best passing kicker in all of the NFL, who's out as well. He is no longer there. And unlike a lot of teams, because the Rams went all in and, hey, it worked, it paid off, they won the Super Bowl. But unlike a lot of teams where we see a lot of these big-name guys go, Stephen, we go to the draft and we say, okay, well, here's where they went to replenish. Well, the Rams didn't have a first-round pick. The Rams didn't have a second-round pick, right? So they didn't have a pick until they get to the third round, where they took offensive guard Logan Bruss, who, by the way, might have to end up starting for this team as a rookie with the way that the offensive line has started to shake out for them, because Andrew Whitworth retired as well, which is a big loss for a team, which is, again, not a guy going elsewhere or getting traded, but still, when you retire, that is a loss as well. So lots of guys out, not a ton of guys in, but I do like the guys that they do brought in. Listen, I think you are of the same mindset as me. We're going to find out if Allen Robinson is actually any good or not, because this is the first time in his career he's actually played with a good quarterback. And so, I have fairly high hopes for what Allen Robinson still is as a player. He's not incredibly old yet, and he is stepping into about the best situation ever, because he doesn't have to be the absolute number one, because we know that that's Cooper Kupp.
His props were only the second player I found that I want to bet the overs on going into the season. Football's a violent sport. I didn't do as well with overs last year as I did on unders going in, so shifting my strategy there. We're talking about a player in Allen Robinson who has seasons of 1,100, 1,200, and more than 1,400 yards in his career despite horrific quarterback play, and his over-under for yards is set at 850. His touchdown prop I kind of like too at over 6.5. This is a Rams offense that going from Goff to Stafford was among the most aggressive passing the ball in the NFL last year. Stafford was 4th in red zone passing rate. He was 2nd in pass rate inside the 10-yard line. He was 1st in pass rate inside the 5-yard line. And the Rams, 79.7% of their offensive touchdowns last year were passing touchdowns, number 1 in the NFL. So I think that this is way too low on Allen Robinson going into the season. Robert Woods was on pace to break 850 yards last year in this offense before he tore his ACL, and he was on pace to do it in only 14 games. So I like these numbers on Allen Robinson, and I think you can make an argument. Now, we can have a narrative debate here on whether or not him playing like crap and on a bad team last year makes him eligible for comeback player of the year in the minds of the voters, because it's usually an injury thing. But 30-1 on Allen Robinson for comeback player of the year.
The Rams, as you would imagine, with a team like this, with going kind of all in, being the returning champion, the best number you can find on them to win the Super Bowl is 12-1. Right now, they are sitting right there, kind of the same number you can find the Packers and the Chiefs and the Chargers. Kind of they're in that little range right there as far as Super Bowl favorites go. Stephen, I get it. I understand why they're the number that they're at. I look at this division as well. I think it's a 2-team division, 2.5-team division. So I get it from that standpoint as well. You're getting 2 free wins against the Seahawks for sure. The Cardinals, where are they at? What are they going to look like the second half of the season? Are they going to fade like they have so many times before? So I understand the numbers here with the squad. And if you kind of look at the projections, they're projected to be very, very good again. In those million projections that Football Outsiders does, they have them as the 4th overall team DVOA, the 9th best offense, the 5th best defense. So, again, they have them being very, very, very good. And a lot of that has to do with the units that are out there that are still really good. I mean, yes, you lose an Andrew Whitworth. That is never good for an offensive line. But this Joseph Noteboom guy, who when he was forced into playing last season, actually performed very, very well. So you kind of have a top 10-ish borderline offensive line as we head into the season. You've got a top 10 for sure, maybe even top 5 if Allen Robinson is still Allen Robinson pass catching group because you have Cooper Kupp, you have Allen Robinson, and then you have Tyler Higbee, who's kind of an underrated tight end. Van Jefferson's going to be back in a few weeks. Tutu Atwell is kind of running at the number 3 right now, who apparently, again, it's everybody looks awesome season, but I mean, apparently looks really great in training camp and is doing very well for them. The defensive line is, I mean, listen, you've got Aaron Donald, so that's all I need to say. But then, oh, by the way, Leonard Floyd, Ashawn Robinson, Greg Gaines, Justin Hollins, these are all guys that are going to rotate in, keep that line fresh, and allow Aaron Donald to be the beast that he is on that lineup. If you have Donald, Robinson, and Gaines on the line at the same time, Stephen, you have the number 1, 11, and 27 defensive linemen graded by Pro Football Focus last season in all of the NFL. You have 1, 11, and 27 on the same defensive line going at it every single time. They're going to cause all kinds of havoc. And then, of course, the secondary still has Jalen Ramsey. They added Troy Hill. You've got a Taylor Rapp and a Jordan Fuller. So it's hard to poke holes here in this Rams team, really top to bottom, outside of, is there more to this Matthew Stafford thing than we think? I think probably not. But if you look at the secondary, solid, defensive line solid, offensive line solid, pass catcher solid, it's like, where do you tell me that this team is going to go awry, For
sure. Yeah. Obviously all of this is contingent on Stafford being healthy. So that's what I'm operating on. But you mentioned the defensive line, the secondary as well, not just Jalen Ramsey. I think Troy Hill is in line for a bounce back season. He had a grade of just 53 in coverage with Cleveland last year, but with the Rams the year before, a grade of 76. And then they have another cornerback, David Long, who is a top 32 corner in terms of adjusted yards allowed per snap. So 3 deep at the cornerback position on top of their elite defensive line. And people keep asking, like, how are the Rams doing this? How do they give up all their draft picks and still fall under the salary cap? And we've talked on previous podcasts about the cheat code that is rookie contracts. Now, Matthew Stafford isn't that, but he's not expensive either. The Rams are only the 19th ranked team in the NFL in quarterback spending. They're also outside the top 20 in running back spending. That's a pretty good start right there to be able to afford your other positions and other elite talent, which they have. So the other question that people keep bringing up, and it's really hard to predict this, but the Rams have just been incredibly healthy under Sean McVay. Mm-hmm. And can they continue to do it? They have been top 10 all 4 years over the past 4 in terms of not missing guys in games due to injury. And our new injury expert, Will Carroll, has a good relationship with that staff, and he's told us that the Rams medical staff is elite, one of the best in the NFL in terms of maintenance for their players. They have a system down that they've done year over the year, and I think it would be ignorant to say that's not at least playing some part in them being able to stay healthy throughout the season, and be a little bit more lucky, quote unquote, than other teams. So I'm not going to just immediately assume that there's going to be negative regression for the Rams with injuries going into this season, because they've maintained this level of health for 4 years now. And the other side of this too, Matt, they might actually get some positive regression. They were actually a little unlucky on the field last year. They were only +2 in turnovers, and they were 26th in fumble luck. So you could actually see better results from the Rams this year if things go their way. So I was having a hard...
I think
go ahead.
I think the only knock is the schedule. I think the only knock is
it's
the
tough.
Second toughest schedule. It's the second toughest schedule in the NFL heading into the season. Now, it's fortunate when you're one of the best teams in the NFL to navigate through a difficult schedule. But, Bills in week 1, you got to go at Tampa in week 9. You got to go at New Orleans in week 11. You got to go at Kansas City in week 12. And then you go at Green Bay in week 15. And so there's that stretch there outside of the Bills in week 1. But you're looking between 9 and 15 where you got to go cross country to Tampa, cross country to New Orleans. Then you got to go to Kansas City. Then you got to go back a couple of weeks later to Green Bay. So there are some things in that schedule where you're like, hey, look, if they're not playing their absolute best football at the time, maybe there's a trip up or two somewhere along the way. So again, if we're trying to nitpick, if we want to pick anything apart with this team, it could just be the difficulty of that schedule.
The 49ers have a question at quarterback, which we'll get into, but I think top to bottom roster-wise, you can make an argument that the 2 best rosters in the conference are the Rams and the 49ers with the age of the Bucs right now. So Yeah, I think it's going to be a bloodbath here. I couldn't find any reason to fade them at a plus number to win the division. I don't know if we're going to get much better price after the first week of the season, but if they lose to the Bills and the Niners beat a cupcake week 1, maybe we get a little bit better number on the Rams. But just on paper going into this season, it's hard for me to nitpick this Rams team like I did last year, and they go on all the way to win the Super Bowl. So I think that McVay is sharp when it comes to game planning. I think he completely went back to what he wants to do with a quarterback that he trusts last year. I mean, Matthew Stafford was double what Jared Goff was on yards per attempt on deep drops and deep passes. They went from a negative EPA per attempt to a positive on play action, going from Goff to Stafford. Stafford was top 5 in EPA per attempt without play action. And Sean McVay went back to using a lot more one tight end, one running back personnel groupings, went from 60% to 87% last season with Stafford under center. So that allows them to disguise runs more often, lighter boxes for the run when you have 3 wide receivers on the field. So from a game planning perspective, McVay is one of the best. The only thing I'd like to see more of is that he needs to be a little bit more aggressive on fourth downs, I think. They had 10 opportunities to go for it on fourth down in the 6 games they lost last year, and he only went for it twice. So, and those were 4th and 5 or shorter. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think from a game planning, he's great. I think in game he could be a little bit better. But I mean, if we're trying to poke holes in this roster, it's kind of a stretch.
Yeah, it's really tough. Again, plus 125, the best number you can get on them to win the West. If somebody said, hey, I really want to bet on the NFC West, I live out here, I really like football to watch out here. If they told me they wanted to bet on the Rams, I'm not talking them out of it. I still think that, there's some upshot for some of these other teams, but I still think that the Rams are definitely the clear-cut favorite. And just remember, guys, Odell does loom. He is still a free agent. There's a high likelihood that the Rams would just take him back because, the devil, stuff like that situation. So again, they could have a guy that comes in and just, more of a red zone presence, I think, at that point for Odell Beckham. But again, nice red zone presence to have as you head down the stretch and trying to make a run. All right, let's look at the San Francisco 49ers, and this is a team that finds themselves as the second favorite here in the NFC West. A plus 180 is the best number that you can find on them should you want to bet them to win the NFC West. If you want them to win the whole damn thing, best number you're going to be able to find is 17-1 out there on this 49ers team. We know now this is for sure Trey Lance's team. So that is no question whatsoever. We don't have to worry about that. Bobby Slowick is a pass game coordinator. Chris Forster's the run game coordinator, but we know Kyle Shanahan calls the shots on the offensive side of things. D'Amico Ryan's back as defensive coordinator. And, I don't have to tell you this, Stephen, but for all the Jimmy G talk, and everyone knows I'm a Jimmy G hater and all that, for all the Jimmy G talk, they're 35-16 with him, and they're 8-28 without him. So the numbers do kind of speak for themselves as to what this team is with and without Jimmy Garoppolo on the field. They've made the decision. It is going to be without Jimmy Garoppolo this year. It is going to be Trey Lance. What have they done to help him out? Well, look, they signed Travarius Ward on the defensive side of the ball. They signed Oren Burks on the defensive side of the ball. They signed George Odom on the defensive side of the ball. And you're saying, wait a minute, you said to help Trey Lance. But here's the thing. If a and I'm using air quotes here. I know he's not a rookie, but for all intents and purposes, he's a rookie. I think that you can have a guy that is not constantly playing from behind who can run just the normal offense the way that it's supposed to be run. And I actually think that is a really good thing, a really big thing for a young quarterback. So I bring up the Ward and the Burks and the Odom, and then even, Kamiko Toure on the defensive line. They did sign. They brought in Robert Kimdichie. If he has anything left in the tank or not, nobody has any idea. Hassan Ridgeway, another couple defensive linemen that may or may not end up making the team, may or may not end up in the rotation there. Ray McLeod at wide receiver, Malik Turner at wide receiver as well, adding to what was already a stellar pass-catching group for this team. Now, they did lose Arden Key, DJ Jones, Laken Tomlinson off that offensive line being gone is certainly a huge deal. Contavious Street and edge rushers gone. Raheem Mostert's out of town. Jaquiski Tart is out of town as well. So it's not like they did all bringing in and nothing was going out. It was a pretty much kind of a 1-for-1 trade here. But Steven, I look at this roster, didn't have a first round pick, so they get Drake Jackson, defensive end, in the second round, Tyrion Davis-Price, a running back out of LSU, in the third round, Danny Gray, who's made a couple of preseason plays for them at wide receiver, in the third round as well. So I look at this roster, and like you said, you mentioned we were talking about the Rams. Overall, top to bottom, it's a pretty good looking roster, so long as some of these guys just continue to kind of progress as we have seen over the last couple of years.
It is a Super Bowl roster if they can get Jimmy G production out of Trey Lance. And I think obviously they can add some rushing element there and off script plays that Jimmy G couldn't do. So I think it's, full disclosure, I am a 49ers fan, and I've been trying to figure this out for years of whether or not it's Kyle Shanahan or whether he needs Jimmy Garoppolo, because you mentioned the stat of their record without Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think that's pretty much every NFL team when you get to the backup quarterback, short of Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl. So I think there is a level of talent that is required for Kyle Shanahan to start pulling the puppet master strings and get something out of this, because Jimmy G may have been first in the NFL in yards per attempt, but he was 42nd in air yards, which tells you that Shanahan is scripting this up and scheming this up for short and intermediate passes to get the most out of his amazingly good yards after catch pass options in George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk. So, and for what it's worth, small sample size, in 71 pass attempts from Trey Lance last year, his yak per completion was at 7.0, which was even higher than Jimmy G's. So I think he is capable of at least operating the same offense that they did with Jimmy, but potentially being better on the deep passes. The 49ers have had a quarterback in the top 5 in expected completion percentage in every Kyle Shanahan season, and that included seasons where they were trotting out Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. So he is an offensive game planning master, and now we have a situation with Trey Lance where I think the market is down on this guy. The only bet I really found in the 49ers market that I was attracted to was Trey Lance over 3,300 passing yards. If he misses 2 games, that's still only 220 passing yards per game. That's like bottom of the barrel in modern NFL. And the 49ers averaged 237 per game last year. And again, a number that has been reached by a Kyle Shanahan offense in every single season he's been in the NFL, if you go by combined quarterback yardage. They've had more than 4,000 passing yards every season in Kyle Shanahan's tenure in San Francisco. So I think 3,300 for Trey Lance is a pretty low bar to clear here. And I think that he can do enough for this offense with a roster that is Super Bowl ready.
We're looking at the 13th easiest schedule in the league, and you can tell by the Football Outsiders projections as just to the wide range of outcomes due to the play of Trey Lance, because they have them falling 6 to 8 wins in 34% of the simulations. And obviously those would be the, hey, Trey Lance has bad seasons and he's not ready for the NFL seasons. But then they also have them with 9 or more wins, 54% of the time as well. So that would be, oh, never mind, Trey Lance plays as, up to his potential, or at least close to his potential. So those are those simulations. So you can kind of tell pretty wide range of outcomes here for this squad. And so it does come down to the quarterback play, really and truly a ton. I hate like falling to that crutch, but look, he's going to have a decent offensive line. You got a very good tackle combo with Trent Williams grading out as the number 1 tackle out of 83 qualifiers last year. So, hey, you give a young quarterback a great left tackle, that's a pretty good start. We know the receiving core, as we just mentioned. Deebo, finally happy. Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. What are you going to get from Danny Gray? Even Juwan Jennings is another guy that's going to, could get some action for them as well. It's a really good pass-catching core. The defensive line, bolstered by Nick Bosa, as we know. But, hey, you still have Eric Armstead. You got Drake Jackson. You got Ibukam. You got Hyder. I mean, there's a lot of different guys that can rotate in there to help keep the pressure off of Nick Bosa and allow him to do his thing. And then the secondary should be middle-ish of the pack. I don't think it's going to be extraordinary, but you do add Charvarius Ward, who does a big step up at corner for them. Emmanuel Mosley, Jason Verrett. You got Jimmy Ward at safety. So there are some players there as well. So we've talked about this roster. You talk about Trey Lance. Can he succeed here? I'll tell you the bet that I made, and I think it's a bet that is still a bet that, listen, if you want to have it in your account, it'd be hard for me to talk you off of it on this squad. And I bet Trey Lance for MVP, and I know that seems insanity. The number I did get was a little bit longer than the number that's available now. But even with that, Stephen, I sit here and I take a look. And again, you can look up all of these different little things. We have the prop finder button right there. If you're doing it from the web, if you're doing it from mobile, just go to odds and it'll say prop finder tool up there as well. So be sure and click those things to look up. But I mean, you can find the very best price on any of these players whenever we are trying to get the very best number on these futures bets. You can still find a 40-1 at multiple books. DraftKings, Caesars are out there for Trey Lance to win the MVP. And we always want to make bets where there's a clear path to this actually taking place. Well, the way that this takes place is the 49ers overtake the defending Super Bowl champion and win this division. And if that's the case, Stephen, Trey Lance is going to have a very, very big part of that happening. He's going to have a very, very big part of that being a team that has to finish with, let's say the Rams are down, and a down year, air quote, for the Rams is probably going to be 10
They
wins.
get some injuries.
So
that could help.
Yeah, so if they have 10 wins and yet somehow the 49ers come out on top in this division, that means we're talking about a 12-win team more likely than not. So you have a Trey Lance-led 49ers team that went 12-5 in the regular season. He is going to be in the thick of the MVP talk if they go 12-5 and take down the Rams in the NFC West. And so I understand, is it likely? It's not likely, but it's still a very long number. Even today's number, I think mine was at 60, but even at 40, there is a very clear path to this manifesting, and those are the type of futures tickets that I like to have in my account. And again, not out of the realm of possibility for this very talented 49ers team. Like you said, a couple of key injuries here and there on the Rams side of things. And then now we're talking about the 49ers winning this division.
You've kind of summed up exactly what I thought my opinion of this 49ers team was when I first started studying them, is that with changing from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, the floor is lower, but the ceiling is certainly higher. The range of outcomes is a lot wider with this team. And to your point, they have the talent all around him, and I do think there actually could be some positive regression for the 49ers this season as well. They've been one of the top 10 most injured teams all 5 years under Kyle Shanahan. You would think at some point that's got to go their way. They went 5-5 last year and 13-13 in one-score games the last 3 seasons. And that included 1-5 versus Seattle the last 3 years. So again, reasons why you should be optimistic that they could do better than they've done in the win column in recent years. And for Trey Lance starting out, he caught a break on the schedule because out of the first 6 games, they play the Bears, the Seahawks, the Panthers, and the Falcons in 4 of those first 6. And from week 7 onward, the team caught a break in terms of travel. They don't travel east of Arizona from week 7 on. That's pretty fortunate. There are no cross-country west to east trips for the 49ers for the rest of the season going into the postseason. So some reasons to be optimistic for sure. I'm with you, man. I think that I think Trey Lance is more likely to be better than what this offense was with Jimmy Garoppolo because he potentially opens up some rushing attack, and he also opens up the deep ball attack, which they absolutely didn't do with Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, 42nd in air yards was Jimmy Garoppolo last year. So very, very bullish on this 49ers team, and I think if people want to fade Trey Lance and we're getting some favorable spreads early in the season, I'm going to be on that.
Yep. Last thing I'll bring up, just if you are bullish on this 49ers team, if you do think that this roster lives up to potential, an alt over on this team, if you went with over 11, you're getting right at 2-1 on the over 11. Again, 11-6 pushes you. So, I mean, it's not like you're not going to lose if they go 11-6, but if we're talking about they hit this ceiling like we're talking about, a 12-win season pays you at 2-1. On the win total as well. So just something to throw out there if you are super bullish.
That last note on this team, I would just want to mention, do not forget that this roster was 3 points away from going to the Super Bowl with an injured Jimmy Garoppolo. He had thumb injury in the last 4 games of the season that he was taking shots in to be functional. And then he also picked up a shoulder injury in the last game as well. So don't forget that they were that close to going to the Super Bowl with that much of an injury-flawed quarterback.
Let's talk a little Arizona Cardinals, and this one's fairly interesting. Cliff Kingsbury back, of course, as head coach. Is he going to be back next season if this team finishes up again like they did last season? That is to be determined. No offensive coordinator there because he does that all. Vance Joseph is your defensive coordinator. DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games of the season for a performance-enhancing drug. So what do? They go out and trade for Hollywood Brown because they lose Christian Kirk in free agency. So Hollywood Brown, at least for 6 weeks, is going to have to try and be the number 1 wide receiver in Arizona. They bring in Will Hernandez to play right guard. They bring in Nick Vigil at the linebacker position. They bring in Darrell Williams at running back for some depth there for them as well. There are some big names that are out of town, most notably edge rusher Chandler Jones and wide receiver Christian Kirk. But don't let it go under the radar here that Jordan Phillips on the defensive line is gone. Jordan Hicks at the linebacker position is gone. Chase Edmonds at the running back position is gone. So there are a lot of different things that are going to have to get figured out for this squad because a lot of big-time contributors are no longer in town. This is yet another team that didn't have a first-round pick, so they come back in the second round. They take Trey McBride, who a tight end. They take defensive end Cameron Thomas in the third, and they take another defensive end and Majai Sanders in the third round as well. They didn't have a 4th or a 5th round pick. So no first round, no 4th, no 5th. So they had to do their damage in the 2nd and 3rd where they had 1 second and 2 third round picks. So that's kind of what we're looking at here with this squad, Stephen. Kyler Murray, there was some talk that maybe he was going to be angry. He gets paid, so he should be happy. There should be no drama for this team surrounding as we enter the season. We've known for a long time DeAndre Hopkins was going to be suspended. They've known for a long time DeAndre Hopkins is going to be suspended. So that is all baked into the numbers at this point. That's not sneaking up on anybody out there. So if you did want to come in and back this squad to win the whole thing, you know, if you think that they are going to kind of defy everything and win the whole thing, the best number you're going to find on the Cardinals, 40-1. To win the Super Bowl. If you want them to win the NFC West, like we're talking about right now, the best number you're going to get is 4-1. I'll have to admit, this is one of the most confusing teams for me, Stephen, that there is. I mean, it's you look at the talent here, and you really just start to nitpick everything, right? It's like offensive line should be one of the 10 worst in the NFL. The defensive line, outside of J.J. Watt, has absolutely nothing now that Chandler Jones is gone. So, I mean, it should be, because it's going to go back to the same thing we saw with J.J. Watt in Houston at the end. He's going to get double and triple teamed, and so it's just he's going to make no impact on the defensive line. The secondary is kind of middle of the pack to worse. You know, I mean, it should be probably in the bottom 10, 12 in the league as well. Yet we still have a team that their projection is basically right at 500. People are talking about, hey, if things broke their way, they could actually win this division. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a Cliff Kingsbury guy. I'm not really a Kyler Murray guy. You got to play 6 games without one of the top 5 wide receivers in all of the NFL, with an offensive line that's probably going to be worse, a defensive line that's probably going to be worse, a secondary that's not very good. I mean, where do we start finding the bright spots here?
Kyler Murray, end of list. I mean, it's tough, man. First of all, I do think the roster is worse than it was last year. You mentioned the secondary. I think it could be one of the worst. I mean, Byron Murphy was 49th out of 93 cornerbacks last year in adjusted yards allowed per snap. Marco Wilson was 90th out of 93 in that same stat. So I'm not seeing the upside on the back end there. You mentioned the losses up front in the front 7. Overall, this team is behind the Vikings and basically tied with the Saints. If you look at odds to make the playoffs, to get that 7th spot, those 3 basically, if you look at the odds, are competing for the 7th and final playoff spot in the NFC, and the Cardinals are at plus money. So do with that information what you want. But Matt, could it be as simple as if Kyler Murray is healthy, this is a playoff team. And if Kyler Murray is playing hurt or missing games, this is not a playoff team. Because this is now 2 consecutive seasons where if you look at the splits from before an injury and after an injury, it was stark. In 2020, he had a shoulder sprain from week 1 to 11. He was top 10 in both success rate and EPA per drop back. In weeks 12 through 17 that year, bottom 6 in EPA per play and success rate, bottom 7 in drop back EPA, 20th in drop back success rate. Last year, they start 7-0. They have a primetime game against the Green Bay Packers, who were ravaged by COVID. He suffers an ankle sprain late in that game. From week 1 to 8, the Cardinals offense was top 6 in both EPA per play and success rate. Kyler was top 5 among drop back EPA and success rate. He was having an elite season where he was entering the MVP conversation. From week 9 through 18, Arizona dropped to 14th and 11th in EPA and success rate, 13th and 12th in drop back EPA and success rate. And now there were some backup quarterbacks in there, but if you just look at Kyler, 24th in that span and completion percentage over expectations. So the defense is blitzed more when he was hurt with that ankle. He was pressured a lot more despite not holding the ball as long, and his deep ball became neutralized. 15-yard throws downfield went from a 57% success rate before the injury to just 36 after the injury, and it showed up in the record. 7-0 before, 2-5 with Kyler the rest of the season. Is it that simple that it's whether Kyler is healthy or not, that this is a playoff team or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because you also look at last year. So DeAndre Hopkins played in 10 games. In the 10 games DeAndre Hopkins played in, the offense was 4th in EPA per play. Every other game that he didn't play, obviously the other 7 games, they were 18th in the league in EPA per play. So it's like, here, the thing that you don't get with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins sometimes is these counting stats, because you look at his stat sheet and you say, like, what are you talking about? They were 4th in EPA per play. Look at what he did. He didn't do all that much. Yeah, but you have to account for DeAndre Hopkins, right? I mean, that's the thing. You have to account for him. And what that does is open up the offense for everybody else. And so when DeAndre Hopkins is on the field, it's a game changer. Well, we know for sure he's not going to be out there for the first 6 games of the season. And so this team is likely to be worse. This offensive line, if you take a look, I understand Kyler Murray is able to do stuff with his legs, but Justin Pugh, Rodney Hudson, Kelvin Beachum, these guys are all on the bad side of their career arc. You know, I mean, like there are not very many Andrew Whitworths out there, right, that can play at a high level into their late 30s. That just doesn't happen very often. So we're likely to see a decline on this offensive line just because, again, those guys are older. J.J. Watt has nobody else to protect him now on that defensive line, so he's going to get that double team treatment that he got in Houston again. So he was awesome when healthy, 18.3% pass rush win rate when he was healthy, which is 5th amongst all defensive linemen. But the problem is now Chandler Jones is gone, so everyone's going to go, oh, well, he's the only guy that can do anything to us, so we're going to double team him, and if you can beat our guys one-on-one, the rest of you idiots out there, then fine. That's what we'll allow to happen. And as you mentioned, the secondary, Murphy, Wilson, Hamilton, Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, I mean, they're all either bad or old. And so I actually think this team could be exponentially worse this year. And I am on the big-time no train from a playoff perspective. I do think that when it all comes down to it, the Saints are probably better. I do think that maybe there's a couple of teams that if we think that there's upside to them, that they could end up being better as well. So I got to admit, man, I'm pretty down on this squad. I tried to find different ways to maybe give some upside here. I mean, the upside would just be that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be back for Game 7. You know, I mean, that is an upside at least for this team. But for me, it's a no on kind of the season-long outlook. I don't even want to play them at 4-1 to win the division, because I think if it's not the Rams, it's the Niners. I don't think that it's the Cardinals coming out of nowhere to win this division. So just not for me. If anything, you can get a -150 on the no for this team to make the playoffs. I think that would be the bet that I would make if I had to make a bet on the Arizona Cardinals as we head into 2022.
They were also historically lucky in terms of turnovers last year. The offense had 26 fumbles and recovered 23 of them. Like that's off the charts, unprecedented stuff. So that's not going to go their way this year. They have 4 games on the schedule with a rest disadvantage, and the NFL's most difficult schedule from week 10 onward. So if we're worried about like Cliff Kingsbury's second half of the season, not able to make adjustments and game plan, and other superior coaches being able to neutralize what he does, their schedule from week 10 onward: at the Rams, home against the 49ers, home against the Chargers, home against Bill Belichick, at Denver,
right,
home against the Bucs, at Atlanta, at San Francisco. Other than Atlanta, those are all games that they could totally lose. So it's tough.
And listen, and these projections aren't everything, but again, they just give us at least a baseline of what a computer thinks that could happen here, given the talent on the field. Football Outsiders, again, in 1 million projections of the 2022 season, has this team as the 21st overall DVOA, 17th offense, and 28th defense. So, it's one of those things where, and it's not the end all be all. They certainly could overperform what we think here, but again, I'm out on the Cardinals, and if anything, it'd be a no on the playoffs. Seattle Seahawks. This probably ain't going to take us very long, Stephen. Seattle Seahawks. It's still Pete Carroll. They did promote Clint Hurt from defensive line coach to be the defensive coordinator, so they did at least make one shakeup on the coaching staff there. Shane Waldron is back as offensive coordinator. As we know, Russell Wilson gone, Drew Lock in, Shelby Harris is gone, is in via trade. You also got Quentin Jefferson, Noah Fant is in via trade as well. Justin Coleman at corner, and also Artie Burns at corner. Out, the biggest names, of course, being Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner gone. DJ Reed is also gone. Carlos Dunlap is gone. You got Kerry Hyder, who's gone. Ethan Pochik is gone. So there's a lot of guys that left this team as well. Whenever they kind of saw the trajectory of where this thing was going, they decided to head elsewhere and get out of town. Now, they did have what I consider to be, if there is an upside to this team, would be a pretty good draft. Charles Cross in the first round, a guy that everybody thinks could be a beast for a decade plus on the offensive line. They got Boye Mafe, a defensive end. Of course, we just mentioned all the defensive players that left this team, namely Carlos Dunlap, Bobby Wagner, needed to replace them, so he comes in. But here's, the most Seahawks thing, the most Pete Carroll thing ever. A roster that is so incredibly depleted, maybe one of the worst rosters in all of the NFL, and you spend your second round pick on a running back in Kenneth Walker. And I think Kenneth Walker's fine, Stephen. I think he's a good running back and should have a good NFL career. But when your roster is so talent depleted like the Seahawks is, to spend a second round pick on a running back is just so egregious and lets you know the state of this organization right now. They get another offensive tackle in the third round. They get a corner in the fourth round. But boy, you look at this team, and I want you to try and tell me what we're looking at from an upside perspective, because I literally find zero upside with this team. And people are going to say, hey, look, there's always upside if you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett at wide receiver. Not if there's not somebody that can actually throw them the ball. I mean, like, wide receivers are only as good as the guy that can put it in at least somewhere in their catching radius, right? Like, that has to be somewhere around there. And I know for a fact that Drew Lock can't do that on a consistent basis. We've seen enough of him to know that. And if you have to go with Geno Smith, Lord help this organization. I am so incredibly down on this Seahawks.
Did you see this tweet from Louis Riddick? Quote, "I'm going to say what I have been saying for a while now. The Seahawks are building something special. It's been too obvious to me, made even more obvious seeing it up close today. They just have to figure out that one last position." Obviously, he's talking about quarterback. Are we missing something, Matt? Or is Lou Riddick just trying to get a GM job and get out of TV? What are we doing here?
Dude. That's just, it's pure insanity. Look, if we look at these units, right? And again, this is not the end all be all. The projection system has a team 30th overall, dead last, 32nd offense, 22nd defense. If we go down, 32nd rated offensive line heading into the season according to Pro Football Focus. They are starting rookies at both
Building something
positions.
Special, Matt. Building something special.
Yes, I guess that is building because you have rookies on the offensive line that 2 years from now, like when we see offensive linemen start to play well, they'll be 3-year guys at tackle, and that'll be great because you have good young tackles. But you're starting 2 rookies at the tackle positions. What are these quarterbacks going to do? I mean, it's like not even fair to begin the season. Then you have Gabe Jackson and Damian Lewis at the guard positions, who graded out at 51st and 57th at the position last year, respectively. So, I mean, this is the defensive line did not have a single player graded out higher than a 64 last season. They come in as the 29th graded defensive line heading into the year by Pro Football Focus, and the secondary, with all this talent that is not really there outside of Jamal Adams, is ranked 30th as we head into the season. So again, yes, point to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett all you want, and I agree. That is an awesome receiving duo. You add Noah Fant, that maybe could live up to his potential. He never really did in Denver, but maybe he can in Seattle. You got a pretty good trio then at that point. I will give you that. Stephen, who gets them the ball on a consistent basis, not only from a talent perspective with Drew Lock or Geno Smith, but trying to throw the ball behind the worst offensive line in all the NFL and 2 rookie tackles. This is not fair for either one of these quarterbacks, and not fair for DK Metcalf, for Tyler Lockett, for all the stuff like that. So it's nearly impossible for me to try to find a bright spot and try to find a way that this team is not one of the very worst teams in the NFL.
Greg Olson had a cup of coffee there and then went back to being a TV analyst. He said, quote, "The ideology there was always defense first, kicking game, punt the ball, field position, force turnovers, play defense first, then hand the ball to Russell Wilson at the end of the game and say, go be Magic," end quote. So, I mean, this is the mentality we're dealing with here. So the front office is stupid. They are top 5 in the league in running back spending, and bottom 11 in spending on quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, and cornerback. Those positions are kind of a big deal when you're trying to draft and get better. Pete Carroll is stupid. First down run rate last year increased from 31% to 35%. Those runs went from a 36% success rate to a 30% success rate. In 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field, went from a 35% success rate to a 23% success rate. Despite these decreases in efficiency, Pete Carroll ran the ball 27 more times on first down rush plays last year than he did the year before. He is banging his head against the wall. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. They can't figure out that they don't know what they don't know.
Oh, it's for sure. And listen, here's the other thing. They've replaced the offensive coordinator twice in his tenure, Stephen, and do you want to know the interesting thing whenever they have replaced the offensive coordinator?
Can I guess they ran the ball more or something, or they passed it actually well the year before?
No, they passed it more. They passed it more. There was a slight uptick in passing percentage, and then the guy's out of town the next year because that doesn't fly with Pete Carroll. And so here we are again. I'll tell you guys, I bet an alt under on this team. I bet alt under 5. If you search around, you can find it. It's 4.5 at some places. You can find a 5, so you can at least get a push if they end up 5-11. I took the alt under. I love this bet, Steven. Find me the wins for this team.
Oh yeah,
on the schedule. They are going to be dogs. My guess is they are going to be dogs in every single game they play because they're going to be that bad. They might be favorites in a game or two all season long. And they are going to not have the talent in order to win football games. I love the alt under. I got 2-1 on the alt under for this team to have 4 or fewer wins. If it's a 5, it's a push for me. I love this bet. I feel great about this bet. It doesn't do this team any good further once we get down the stretch. And listen, you and I know the players are always going to play hard. The coaches are always going to coach hard. The front office is going to do what the front office needs to do to make this team better. It's not going to behoove this team to win games down the stretch after they're already miserably bad. they're going to need to draft a franchise quarterback. They are going to need to get one of these top guys that's coming out this year in what looks to be a stellar quarterback crop for the draft that's coming up. So they don't even want to win games down the stretch because you want one of those top picks so you can get the quarterback that you want to build around if they are building, as Louis Riddick says, and via tweet, as you said. So if they are building, you got to have a quarterback to build around, and so they need to be at the top of the draft. So I think this team and the Bears, I think, are the worst two teams in the NFL. I think they will be battling for the worst records in the NFL, and it would not surprise me at all if it ends up being.
You mentioned the alt-under. You could still, if you don't want to be that aggressive, you could still find plus 120 on under 5.5 and still cash it at 5 wins.
Oh.
I mean, oh, baby, that sounds juicy to me. And then on top of that, just to tell everybody, explain how difficult the schedule is, because it doesn't quite measure as one of the top 10 hardest by opponent win totals. But when you're comparing it against the Seahawks, my God, where are the wins? Of their 17 games, 10 are against the AFC West, twice against the 49ers, twice against the Rams, the Chargers, the Bucks. And we haven't even mentioned trips to Arizona and New Orleans yet. That would make 12 of 17 games. So the market I kind of like, you want to get even more aggressive than your alt-under. You're getting more than double the odds of Atlanta and Houston for the Seahawks to have the worst record at 9-1. 9-1 that they have the worst record. So, I mean, it's a crapshoot on who's going to be in that group. But that price seems off to me, Matt.
Absolutely. I love that one as well. I might go try to find that one to get into the account as well. I am not more bearish on any team in the NFL than I am the Seattle Seahawks as we enter this football season. All right, if you stuck with us this long, real quick, we're going to do some BMW Championship for you guys. Hit another outright this past week. So, Stephen, things are this has been a phenomenal call.
You've been amazing, dude. It's been incredible.
This has been so good. This has been so good. I know it's all going to come crashing down next year, but holy mackerel, these last 2 golf seasons have been so amazing. So Wilmington Country Club, we've never seen it before on tour, completely new to us. 68 runners, supposed to be 70. Two guys not going to go. So 68 runners, no cut event. It's a super long course, 7,534 yards, one of the longest courses we've seen in a while. Par 71. What we get, though, is a little bit of a unique setup. We do get the 3 par 5s on this setup. So it's a fewer par 4. So it's 4 3s, 11 4s, and then 3 5s. Big grass greens. Like, you're going to hear about the rough being 4 inches long, but it's bluegrass as opposed to being Bermuda or any of these other like thicker grasses. So it's actually not that bad. It's going to sound bad because you're going to hear 4-inch rough, but like bluegrass is super thin, and these guys are so good. Like they'll cut through that. It's not going to be that big of a deal. The course, tons and tons of bunkers, massive, huge greens. So greens in regulation, don't really worry about that this week because everybody's going to hit the greens. They're huge. They are elevated. They do have a ton of slopes and things like that they're going to have to deal with. Only 4 holes with water danger, but there is some interesting kind of positioning of that water on those 4 holes, some of them on approach shots. So we actually could see water come in play here over the course of this. 8 of the par 4s are under 450 yards. So we actually have some short par 4s, but then we have some massive par 5s and massive par 3s. So 2 of the par 5s are over 630 yards. 3 of the par 3s are over 230 yards. So that's where the length really does balance out here on this course. So, Stephen, for me, if people want to go do their research, I'll tell you where I went with mine, and then you can kind of go from there. Driving distance, huge for me. Strokes gained off the tee. I'm playing this as a bomb and gouge course. I could be wrong, and if it doesn't play that way, then I'll probably have a bad week. But I'm playing this as a bomb and gouge course. So 35% of weight for me is on driving distance and off the tee. 20% on driving distance and 15% off the tee. 12% on approach. 12% on birdie or better gained, because again, I think this could be a bomb and gouge, could turn into, I'm not going to say necessarily a birdie fest, but certainly people are going to be able to go low out there on this thing. Strokes gained par 5, proximity 100 to 125. Those short par 4s, we're going to see some really short approach shots out there. And then I did proximity 200 plus, because on the super long holes, we're going to see some really long approaches. So I want to see who's good from short, who's good from long. Sand-save percentage, because again, tons and tons of bunkers out here. So if you're errant, it's not really the it's not really the bluegrass that I'm worried about so much on the tee shots. It's can you save once you get into one of these bunkers that lines the fairways. 3-putt avoidance because these are massive, massive greens. And that did a little bit of tee to green just because I wanted to see who's been playing well tee to green, but it didn't factor in all that much, just a 3% into the model there. So that's kind of how I went about it this week. If we go all the way back, because I wanted to get some long-term results because I want to make sure that I'm being super thorough with this in such a short field. If we go back 75 rounds, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Will Zalatoris, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler. I mean, I'm sure this doesn't surprise anybody. That's your top 5. It finishes out Schauffele, Finau, Burns, Young, and Homa. If you go to 50 rounds, McIlroy, Thomas, Zalatoris, Scheffler, Young, Finau, Homa, Neiman sneaks into the top 10 there. John Rahm in the top 10, and then Burns right outside at 11. And then if you go to the 36 round, McIlroy, Thomas, Finau, Zalatoris, Young, Davis. Cam Davis actually slips into the top 10 when you go to the 36 round. Scheffler, Homa, Schauffele, and then Taylor Pendrith slips into the top 10. Burns also at 11th in the 36 round model. So those are the guys. I think it's going to be a top-heavy tournament. I think it's going to be one of the guys at the top that wins. It's only a 68 runners, so the odds are not going to be super juicy for players this week, Stephen. So I think you just have to understand you can probably only put 2 or 3, 4 guys maybe outright on your card. If you want to get really wacky, you can probably go 5 outright guys, but you're not going to get fat numbers on any of these dudes, and it's probably going to be somebody from the top that ends up winning this thing. Probably someone who's pretty good off the tee, probably someone who's pretty long off the tee. That's kind of my best advice as we head into I
mean, I've been slightly profitable this year, but to hell to what I think, man. You're the money bags this year, man. You've been cashing outrights all over the place. So I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked John Hasselbauer on our course preview earlier this week. All of those big names at the top of your model are also all shorter than 20-1 if you look at the outrights. It's not easy to decipher who to actually pick of that group. So who did you start your card with and why?
Yeah. Listen, I understand that the putting has kind of gone awry for him, but look, I started with Justin Thomas, and if you look at the model doesn't lie, right? I mean, I'm just plugging in numbers, and they're spitting out what's happening, and you can go back 75 rounds, which is basically the majority of the season. You can go back 50 rounds. You can go back 36 rounds, and it's Justin Thomas, right, at the top of these models, and he does every single thing well. If you look at the 36-round model, for everything that I put in, the worst he's at in this field is 18th, and that's proximity from 200 plus over the last 36 rounds. And everything else, he's top 15. He's top 10 in the majority of the stats as well. It's just, I know he hadn't putted well. I get it. I think Justin Thomas is talented enough to run hot over the course of 4 weeks. And here's the other thing. It's a no-cut event, Stephen. No-cut events for Justin Thomas. That is where this dude thrives, because guess what? If he thinks he's still in it, we know he is one of the dudes that can go super low in any given round. Love Justin Thomas in these short field, no cut events. And so I love him. It's hard to make a case against Rory. It's hard to make a case against some of these other guys at the top as well, but the shortest guy.
I took Rory in one and done, but I can't play him at 10-1 with all these other guys that are playing just as well. I opted for Scheffler at 18-1 before his odds shortened after the Cam Smith withdrawal news. But yeah, I mean, they're all good, man. They're all really good. They're all trading wins back and forth here. So who the hell knows? The only guy I feel really good about outside that top tier of 8 that are shorter than 20-1 is Cameron Young. I hope his mind hasn't already gone off the live as what's reportedly happening here, but there's still a lot of money on the line here. And you can count on a few fingers the number of players who have driven the ball better than Cameron Young and driven the ball farther than Cameron Young. So I think I got him at 30-1. The best number's 25 now. That's kind of where I started my card.
Two guys I would point out if you do want longer shot tickets, if you're guys that like to play more lottery type stuff, and I think that's perfectly fine in a tournament like this. I mean, it's not likely to happen, but you don't see fat odds on guys that have had seasons like. I mean, listen, we got the best 68 players that are going to be teeing it up this week. I mean, they earned their way here. Two guys that might make my kind of just the ancillary deal, Cam Davis and Taylor Pendrith. If you look over the last 24 rounds, these guys rank super high for me in the model that I put in. And so they're coming in pretty decent form. They check a lot of the boxes that I'm looking for here. You can find these guys 75, 80, 90-ish to 1, out there. Cam Davis, if you look at this, 8th in this field in driving distance. He's 12th in this field of birdie or better gain, 14th in strokes gained on the par 5s. He's 5th in proximity from 200 plus. And remember, these long par 5s and these long par 3s, that matters. He's 14th in 3-putt avoidance on these massive greens that are going to be out there. So there are a lot of things that the boxes that he checks along the way here at a ticket that, again, you're going to get 75, 80, 85, 90, something like that on him. And then Taylor Pendrith, 4th in this field in driving distance, 6th in strokes gained off the tee, 15th in birdie or better gain, 3rd in strokes gained on par 5s, 4th in sand saves. So even if he's hitting it way out there and he finds one of these bunkers, he's been very good at being able to make sure that those bunkers aren't costing him. And he's been 15th overall tee to green as well. So, again, longer shot dudes that if you want to have kind of that lottery ticket in your account as well, that I really do like as well. So, man, Steve and I mean, listen, we're at the home stretch here of the golf season. Hopefully everybody can really go in. Again, if you want to build a model, I would build a tee heavy model this week. Proximity, like a scoring model. I think that this course plays 16 to 18 under. I really do. I think this plays 16 to 18 under, and I think guys are going to need to make some birdies out there. And so that's kind of how I'm going about it this week, and hopefully I am correct. But as always, listen, get John's picks over on thelines.com. Get in the Discord, chat some golf. We got an awesome little golf community in there as well. Steven, me, Brett, John, everybody posts our official picks over there in the Discord as well, so you'll know what our cards look like. You'd have seen my card last week. I had Will Zalatoris. We hit that outright as well, so you get that over there for free in the Discord every single week as well. Subscribe, rate, review, whether you're listening to us, whether you're watching us. We do appreciate that as well. For Steven, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys soon.